It's getting out of control. I mean, I think by almost any standard.
All right, so Bitcoin is at an all-time high. Why does it keep going up?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that the SEC just made it easier for the average person to invest in it by approving an ETF. So that clearly has made it a lot easier for people to buy into it. I also think it has something to do, particularly in the context of the fact that gold is going up at the same time, at least recently, that it has a lot to do with the fiscal and monetary situation in the U.S. and around the world. But particularly in the U.S., there's really no coordination between fiscal and monetary policy when it comes to inflation. Yeah. And I think people are looking for hedges against fiat currencies, particularly the dollar. So I think that's another reason why people are looking for alternatives to what would traditionally be, again, seen as fiat currencies.
Okay, so you think it's getting a little out of control?
It's getting out of control. I mean, I think by almost any standard. Right now, the U.S. has $34 trillion in debt. The last $1 trillion was added in 3 months. And part of the problem is that we never termed out our debt. 50% of our debt matures in the next 3 years. So interest expenses are rapidly increasing and rapidly really crowding out other parts of the budget.
Yeah, it sounds really dangerous.
It is. You know, having the reserve currency has been called the exorbitant privilege. There was a French finance minister called Giscard d'Estaing. He called it the exorbitant privilege. And what he meant is that you get away with a lot of bad behavior when you have the reserve currency. You can do a lot of risky things. But we're kind of rapidly approaching, Johnny Depp, Charlie Sheen types of levels of irresponsibility, I think, fiscally. And,
fiscal policy is Johnny Depp, Charlie Sheen level, like the edge of falling apart, maybe, or risk-taking.
Well, we're taking a lot of risks.
Yeah.
And the biggest, it's hard to lose the reserve currency once you have it, and the U.S. is not at risk of losing it, but it is at risk of having significantly higher interest rates, or having a much weaker currency, or baking in higher inflation for a long period of time, just based on the fact that we're not being responsible in terms of our fiscal responsibilities.
If our fiscal policies are Charlie Sheen in the darkness, what is Bitcoin and gold, or who are Bitcoin and gold? Is it Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I think would be they're maybe seen as the 12-step programs, or they're the things that would kind of anesthetize you to some of the bad decisions that we're making at the federal level. Part of the problem we've had this policy of quantitative easing and financial repression since the global financial crisis from 2009 through 2021, and I think we purposely suppressed interest rates to stimulate the economy. Part of the problem with doing that is that you remove the price mechanism for policymakers and for investors. So there's a lot of moral hazard that gets built into the system where policymakers are saying, what's the problem? We'll just run bigger deficits. Or even investors say, we'll just take more risk because we're not worried about interest rates being kind of the frontier justice that it normally should be in any sort of real free market.
Yeah, it feels like we're playing kick the can down the road.
You bet.
And the election coming up in November is like a good marker in the sand for politically, where it's like they don't want a recession between now and November, so they're going to do whatever they can to kick that can.
Absolutely.
Beyond into December, right?
Yeah, and that's both sides. I don't want to make it a political issue, but but I think clearly administration is trying to avoid a recession at all costs, and in some ways that's noble because bad things happen during recessions. People lose their job. It's not pleasant. By the same token, if you believe in free markets, as I do, business cycles are a normal part of the evolution of the economy. And there is a risk to avoiding a recession at all costs, and that's, in my opinion, will be inflation longer term. It's hard to have it both ways. It's hard to kind of fix everything if you believe in free markets and the wisdom of free markets.
Gotcha. So would you be a buyer of Bitcoin right now?
I probably, it's hard to say this, but I probably would be. I would view it more as speculative. It's very, in my opinion, it's more speculative than gold. But I certainly wouldn't short it. It seems to be there'll be more demand for it, not less, unless there's a change in our approach to our fiscal policies.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that's shorting Bitcoin right now, they got to have their finger on the trigger 24/7.
Yeah, no, it's risky both ways. It's risky on the long side and risky on the short side. Right now, I think it's riskier to be short than long.